You know that under state law, cities only.
I know I looked at 1 acre, and then the other one was like 2 houses per acre, and then the
Wow,
other one
because
is
I've
about
seen
2.5 houses.
Yeah, I think they actually said what theirs works out to, if I remember, is 2.7.
That's about what it's going to be.
Yeah. And remember, just so you understand, I think you come from planning commission, so you understand this.
I know this.
Oh.
That's for later, because what's right now is they have to get the zoning, zoning approved.
All of a sudden, meeting for EMS.
And then when they propose to do something, that's to come up with the, what's permitted for the subdivision.
Can it be voted down after that? You have to be alone, it really can't be voted that down.
Not by council, and really shouldn't be by planning commission either, because we have requirements in subdivision regulations.
It's supposed to go in that way and around, but
If you meet the requirements, if people meet the requirements by staff and other agencies, then planning commission.
I looked, I was here when all this stuff was, the planning committee was doing all this. Back in.
So they should be
Really started
similar.
2014 or something like that, and it kind of got
Should be,
approved in
they do it that right.
2016.
Actually started in 2006, finalized in 2006, but they worked on it.
I mean, I was working on it, because there was all like changes and things like that, and the size of the lot dropped.
Yeah, I hope this is approved.
And I had some other requirements.
And then
This
know the question
business
come up
is
before.
we have to
I just wanted to
3,000 square foot or less and above, stuff like that. What's the guy name? What?
I'm doing all right.
His council members mentioned something to his new county attorney about second amendments, actually.
Well, it's gonna be all over the state.
I was talking to the Sumter County attorney about something else and asked him what's come up there, and he said, no. And I said, well, according to what's all over, he gets some pressure. He said, what? It's just across the river.
Yep. Only problem they're gonna have is if they prevail upon them to enforce this or something. Enforce or.
Is this being live streamed?
Yep.
Okay, I didn't see you in the website. I brought my recorder.
Yeah, well, it's, I like what Ori has done. Ori took the language that was offered. We wouldn't get down to the, what's going to happen with it. They just said, we strongly support not funding anything that would be unconstitutional, but we're in accord with the federal state constitution. And Spartanburg, based on what Mary said, Spartanburg just adopted the ordinances it was presented. There haven't been any permanent. I don't have any signed ordinances. We can go through. Resolution.
So you're how old? You ain't 62, are you? 65. Okay. Well, you don't live here. Oh, I got you. There's a reason for everything, ain't there? How are y'all? Wonderful.
See if I can find it.
Hey Jay, you making any headway with that second amendment?
To get it back, Wayne wants to see it, so I want him to see it, but I haven't, every time I sit down and try to write it,
sir.
Our shed finished?
What's that? Heck, no, but I'm working on it. I got some people coming in tomorrow to put trusses up, and then we got roofers coming in next week, so.
You got it
We're working
going
on
on. Wish I was that far along,
Well,
but my son's remodeling.
I'll tell you what, I'm way ahead of.
In order. Election of chairman, county administrator.
Yes, sir. The floor is open for nominations for the position of chairman of this committee.
I nominate, Mr. Scurry.
Second.
Well, let's see, are there other nominations? If there are no other nominations, then Mr. Shealy seconds. And what is the pleasure of the council? Yea or nay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chairman?
Okay. Any additions or delete, any adoption to the agenda for tonight? Do I hear a motion? We accept the agenda as is.
So moved.
Approval of the February 3rd meeting. Council, raise your hand. All in favor? So moved. Item number 5, update on the planning commissioner at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is currently a development that's going in off of Circle H Road, Granny Hill, and one other road. It is now known as Stewart Landing. It originally started with a different name. This started about, actually a little over a year ago. We were first contacted by the developer on January the 3rd. Excuse me, we worked with them and went through the process for what they wanted. It would require that they change the zoning, the area. They had 9 parcels and they were zoned variously R2, RS, limited commercial, and general commercial. And for their desired development, they needed it all zoned RSM. And the reason for that, excuse me, is because what they propose as sort of their first phase, it's not really phase, but it's their first big development, is what's called a cluster development. And that, for the size lots that they wanted, RSM was best suited to give them the size of lots that they wanted. Council approved the rezoning request. It was recommended by the Planning Commission. It was approved by Council. Third reading was had in July of this year, public hearing and third reading. There was some delay in getting to that point due to COVID, and then they had prepared what's called a sketch plan initially, a very abbreviated sketch plan. They provided more of a sketch plan, which in essence was like their preliminary plat. Just let me make sure everybody understands the process. They have to have proper zoning to do what they want to do. Once they have that, then if they're going to do a development like this, it's a subdivision, which was required, has to meet the subdivision regulation requirements. And this is more than a mere splitting of a parcel of land into 2 parcels. And so they have presented their preliminary plan, called preliminary plat. It has been reviewed. There are about 6 agencies or groups that review it, such as DOT, Water and Sewer. Ms. Peters reviews it for FEMA purposes. Ms. Fain reviews it for stormwater with the assistance of a consultant. Mr. Pisano is Public Works Director, since these will be county maintained roads, reviews it. And we also have retained the services of a consulting engineer to review the design. They have provided us with a preliminary plat. It was reviewed by all of those agencies and departments, and they offered some suggested changes. Some said it's fine as it is. They took those comments and they revised those. And at the last Planning Commission meeting, we failed to have a quorum but we did hand out 4 of the plans and construction with the comments to the 4 members who attended, and Ms. Peters and Ms. Fain assured us, well, they delivered the other 6 plans to the Planning Commission members to their homes. And so it is now in the hands of the Planning Commission. I did a memo to accompany what was handed to them and basically said they need to be prepared when they come for the February meeting to vote on approval of this, and suggested that if they have any concerns, any issues, they should send those to Ms. Peters, and she will combine any and all concerns into an email that will be sent to the developer, and once she gets a response, she'll provide that to all the Planning Commission members, if there are any. I don't know. She hasn't had any so far. And that's where we are. Hopefully, when the Planning Commission meets, we'll have a quorum on February, and they'll be able to approach and decide what to do with the plan. I'm happy to answer any questions. I can get more into the weed and the details if you want me to.
Mr. Chairman, just want to ask Jay a question. If they don't act within 60 days, it's approved automatically?
If they don't act within 60 days of when it was presented to the Planning Commission, it's considered to have gotten approval unless they get the developer to agree to extend the period.
And one of the reasons I wanted you to give this update is because we have another subdivision going through. And I know for this cluster development, Ann had to do some things to determine whether they met the requirements for the smaller lots. As small as 7,500 square feet for a lot. I don't think you have that with the RSM designation that they're seeking for 773 and Jolly Street.
I don't think so, Mr. Adams, but I'm not aware of what they are actually asking for.
773 Jolly Street Road is just a straightforward subdivision, not cluster development.
Okay, and the other thing is, this council is in the reading process now. Third reading comes up the 17th, not tomorrow, not Wednesday night, but the 17th for that subdivision. For the committee to understand what sort of latitude the planning commission, the planning staff and commission have and don't have with regard to approving it. I know that once the council finishes the rezoning, it's in the hands of the planning commission and the staff. And what kind of latitude do they have to make changes, make requirements, that sort of thing?
The Planning Commission?
Both staff and planning commission.
Well, staff has not, as far as I know, been presented with the sketch plan yet. That's the first thing that you have to have with the subdivision.
I think that, Mr. Shealy, this is in your district, right? You might get people saying, well, can we require them to do this? Can we require them to do
It's
that?
already been being asked.
Yes, so, and that's the thing I wanted you to deal with, the latitude that either staff or the commission has at that.
Can restrictions be put on that piece of parcel?
I've heard, are
But
we
this is a whole
talking to
different-
773 now?
That
or
one
are we
is
talking the other?
773.
He's updating you on
That's the
Stuart Landing,
773.
where we are with that. And I know that Mr. Shealy's gonna get the question about his subdivision. When it gets to the planning commission, after there's a vote, and the rezoning has been granted, if indeed it is granted, what, can they still come to the planning commission, the community, and say, we want this, or we want that? What sort of latitude is there?
Let me try to respond this way, Mr. Adams. Once it's approved, the rezoning is approved by council, then it sort of goes to the Planning Commission, except staff has input as well. That review committee that I talked about with Stuart Landing also would apply to this. The requirements, there's not a whole lot of leeway for either staff or the Planning Commission. It's set out in the subdivision regulations, the requirements that they have to meet. Deals with stormwater, FEMA, deals with roads, it deals with other improvements. As far as I know, they're not asking for a cluster development, so issues about open space that were required in that would not apply here. I haven't seen anything, and I don't know what their plan is yet. But basically, once council gives the rezoning approval, if they choose to do so, then it goes back to the Planning Commission, and it goes through that same phase where they would present a preliminary plat. I'm assuming we would retain the same consulting engineer to assist us with that aspect, who would review it and offer comments. I don't know if they've got water and sewer out at the location, but if they do, they would be involved. The state would be, all the same parties would be involved, and they would offer comments. They would have to respond to it. Once they do that, then it goes to the Planning Commission for their review. Generally speaking, that review is limited to if there's something that the Planning Commission feels they did not comply with. So it's not like Planning Commission has a lot of leeway. Now, excuse me, in the Stewart Landing model, or the Stewart Landing deal, I know that the developer met a couple of times at least with community members, and I'm told that there were some changes made. I was not involved in those meetings. So the community certainly, if the developer will meet with them, may be able to come to some agreement on something.
It's pretty much in the hands of the developer at that time, though.
Well, the developer and the Planning Commission.
Right.
And the community, anybody who wants to, Mr. Metz in the audience will tell you, can attend the Planning Commission meetings. It's not a public hearing, but typically the Planning Commission members will allow people who have signed up to speak. And I can tell you, having attended several Planning Commission meetings, quite often people speak and are heard. It's not like third reading. When we have that, there will be a public hearing scheduled, and we have to allow that. We don't have to allow public members to speak at this council meeting, but beyond the public hearing. Or Planning Commission doesn't, but it has been their tradition that if somebody signs up for it, they'll be glad to let them talk.
I have a question, Jay, going back to the Stewart Landing issue, and once something's been, the zone has been approved for the type process, whether it's, rural, residential, whatever, commercial. If the zone has regulations and the builder complies with the regulations, what is the option available to the Planning Commission to impose requirements outside, above, and beyond what are contained in the zone for that area?
They don't have any authority to do that, Mr. Hipp. They can discuss it, and they can try to, shall we say, negotiate something with the developer, but it's not a requirement, and they can't impose it.
As long as the developer complies with the zone as approved, Planning Commission is pretty much obligated to accept that. Is that not correct?
Once the review committee, those people that review it, sign off on it. If a review committee, if let's say Brent had a problem with their proposed water and sewer, how they're going to put the lines down, and said we can't work with this, and the Planning Commission has every right to say, you've got a problem, you've got to resolve this, we won't approve it until you resolve it. Because that's a requirement built into the subdivision regulations. But as far as people from the community saying, we want you to, I don't know, put a restrictive covenant that says you'll never use blue lights in the neighborhood, they can ask if they'll do that, but they can't force that.
What the point we're at now, prepared to go forward?
For which one, Mr. Scurry?
We're down in prosperity area.
That one is waiting for, well, he said you talking about on the lake, or you talking about 773?
In the lake.
Okay,
We're just waiting for the Planning Commission to.
right. We're waiting for it to go back to the Planning Commission on the Planning Commission meeting in February.
Okay.
Approve or not approve preliminary plan.
Actually, it's more or less to approve. And once they approve the preliminary plan, then if the developer chooses to start building, they can bond certain improvements so they can begin selling before they have it built. Before they can actually sell without bonding it, they have to have final plat approval, which is under our system that we have now, our process, that is supposed to be all but a given once they get past preliminary plat.
Okay.
It's already zoned correctly, though.
It is, it has been
It's
rezoned
already
already.
been, okay.
Was there any objection by the Planning Commission to what's being proposed?
For Stewart Landing, Mr. Hipp?
Yes.
No, because they haven't officially seen it until it was given to them at the last meeting. So they haven't, they may know about it, I don't know. I don't recall if any planning commission members were in attendance at the meeting as it went through rezoning.
It did go before the planning commission early on, didn't it?
No, no, this is the first time the planning commission sees it. It went for the rezoning, but not the development itself. And I explained to them when they were going through that process, because there were citizens who did not like the proposal. I explained to them that what the citizens were asking for was not appropriate at this time because it had not yet been rezoned.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Item number 6, discussing the President's elevated public works department, Mike Fink.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The item that I have before you this evening is a request for approval of purchase of a mini excavator for the Public Works Department. This is to be purchased with leftover funds from fiscal year 18-19 in our capital expenditures. The money that was budgeted originally, we had 3 items that were purchased. There was a motor grader. There was $260,000 budgeted. We spent $213,484.71. That left a surplus of $46,515.29. There was a medium-duty rescue truck that was budgeted at $300,000. For that, we paid $288,376. And then there was a used rescue truck with $150,000 budgeted, and we spent $149,217. So the remaining balance in that account is $58,922.29. We received a quote under state contract for the mini excavator at $56,708.79. Just to show a little bit of a need for this, we completed a project down on Silver Street under CPST, and we had to rent a similar machine because it had tracks on it. It was very muddy down there. We couldn't bring our large excavator down there. It would have just torn it up, and we couldn't bring any of the wheeled machines in because it would have done the same thing. It would have rutted up the walking track that we were working on. So we rented it, I think, for a little over 2 weeks at $810 a week. So there is a need for it. You know, this would allow us to get into some tighter spaces and not tear up surrounding property because we have to use what we have on hand. So I think it would be good in the long run for us to have this.
Any questions, Council?
Is this something you get 3 different quotes on, or?
Under state contract, they have to go by a certain price. Under this specific one, it's 28% discount on a John Deere. So we don't normally get 3. I have contacted the local dealer here. I haven't gotten anything back from them on a quote yet. But before we proceed, I'll definitely look at that and see if one does come in under the other, and we'll go with the cheaper of the 2.
The purchasing ordinance says that if it's available under state contract, we don't have to get prices. And usually, I don't know if anybody's ever beat a state contract price.
I don't think so.
Probably not.
If they're willing to, and we have asked them at times,
Yes.
so.
Mr. Pisano, how many times have, you indicated it's $800 and something a week to rent the equipment?
Yes, sir.
How many times have you rented that piece of equipment in the last 2 years?
We only did it that one time. We've normally made do with what we have on hand. And like I said, that does sometimes cause property damage adjacent to where you're working just because you have to get a bigger machine in there.
I mean, that's like, you could rent one for over a year every week and still come out ahead?
In the short term, yes, sir. If you're looking in the long term, which is how we normally keep our equipment, you know, it'll pay for itself over time.
And you rented it how many weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
This would cut down on the use of the larger one some though, correct?
Yes, sir.
Which would extend the life of it.
Yes, that's correct.
The other question I have is, this is for the 2018-19 capital budget.
Yes, sir.
Why is this still remaining unspent, and we've already gone through the 2019-20 budget?
I'd have to defer that to Ms. Cromer.
It has to be an amendatory ordinance to amend it in order to add any additional equipment to this one. We just received the rescue truck several months ago, so when everything gets paid, I go through them and say, okay, this is what we got left over. I've called the bank and they're okay with it, but council has to do an ordinance which takes.
So do we have any money outstanding capital for any years previous to 2018-19?
Yes. We've already, Mike used the 16, 17 several years ago to buy a piece of equipment. We don't usually have this much left over.
Do we have any capital left over in 2019-20?
Well, this is lease purchase. The capital, is done fiscal year. This is only lease purchase.
That was my mistake, sir. I misquoted that.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
What happens is the bank funds the lease purchase, and then the money remains in the bank until we buy the equipment. And once the equipment is bought, then the money that's left is what Debbie is talking about.
Right. Yes, sir.
No more questions?
I just, I would like to, a little more compelling argument that this is a good expense if we, since we have only used it 2 weeks, only needed it, maybe we've needed it more times and didn't have it, but if we needed it more times, I'm not sure why we didn't rent it more times. But, to have rented something 2 weeks at $800 a week versus buying it for $56,700 is a little bit, I have a little hard time grasping that. Maybe there's some better, more in-depth justification, but what I'm seeing right here just doesn't seem to scream good financial responsibility.
Well, as you said, sir, I think there are probably other times that we could have used this machine, and we didn't expend the funds. We try to be fiscally responsible in that manner, too. You know, we'll make do with what we have, and we can continue to do so.
We need that type of equipment every week,
No, sir.
a month?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, there are times where it's definitely going to fit the job. There are times where we can make it fit the job.
Right.
It would be hard for me to stand before you and say, well, we're definitely going to use it, you know, 2 times a month, every month. I can't do that.
So it wouldn't be to council to purchase one.
I'm sorry?
It wouldn't be to our advantage to purchase one of those equipment.
I feel that it would, but ultimately the decision is up to council.
There again, you could save your bigger machinery
Yes, sir.
some life on it if you use the smaller one.
Yes, sir.
And the bigger machine is a lot more expensive than that.
Yes, we purchased a new backhoe 2 years ago. It was a little over $100,000 for the backhoe.
What do you anticipate the life expectancy on that, Mike?
Something like this, you're probably looking at 20 years or more.
15, 20.
No questions?
I don't have any more questions.
Thank you.
I have some reluctance.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We will need a recommendation whether to go forward with it to full council or it dies right here.
Full council.
Is that,
I recommend to go forward.
All in favor?
thank you, sir.
Item 7, executive session, Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, staff requests an executive session under Code Section 30-4-70A of the South Carolina Code of Laws as amended 1976 for discussion, negotiations, and incident proposed contractual arrangements and proposed sale or purchase of property, the receipt of legal advice where the legal advice relates to a pending, threatened, or potential claim or other matters covered by attorney-client privilege, settlement of legal claims, or the position of the public agency in other adversary situations involving the assertion against the agency of a legal claim. Specifically, this would involve the possibility of purchasing property adjacent to county-owned property. So if there's a motion for executive session, we can discuss that more fully if it's approved.
Any question? We go forward. Make a motion?
We would need a motion and
Need a motion?
a committee to go executive session.
I make a motion, we're going to executive session.
I'll second.
The motion second, we all in favor by raising the hand. We all in favor, Mr. Adams.
Mr. Chairman, the committee met in executive session for the stated purpose and took no action while in executive session.
Any other public comments? If not, to the motion adjourned. Motion and second for adjourned. Thank you all so much.